I am 26 years old. My husband, Liam, and I were expecting our first child. My pregnancy had been blessedly easy, a smooth 9 months that felt like a calm sea before the beautiful, chaotic storm of parenthood. We were ready. The nursery was painted a soft, gentle yellow. A tiny crib stood assembled in the corner, waiting. We had read the books, taken the classes, and packed the hospital bag weeks in advance. Everything was in its right place, prepared for the moment our lives would change forever. My parents were, by all accounts, excited. At least they said they were. My mother had called me every other day for the last month of my pregnancy. "Any twinges, honey?" she would ask, her voice bright with anticipation. "Your father and I are just on pins and needles. We have the car gassed up, ready to go the second you call." My father, a man of fewer words, would get on the extension and grunt his agreement. "We'll be there. Wouldn't miss it for the world," he had promised. I believed them. I had no reason not to. Despite their quirks, they were my parents. They had always been obsessed with their routines, their hobbies, their world. Their biggest shared passion was sports, specifically the city's professional football team. Their moods for the week were often dictated by the outcome of Sunday's game. A win meant a cheerful, generous father and a humming, baking mother. A loss meant clipped sentences and a heavy atmosphere in their house for days. It was a part of them, a defining characteristic that I had long ago accepted. Liam, my husband, was more skeptical. He had seen the way their passions could morph into self-absorption. "Are you sure they'll drop everything?" he had asked me one evening as we folded tiny onesies. "What if there's a big game on?" I had laughed and waved his concern away. "It's the birth of their first grandchild, Liam. Of course they'll drop everything. It's not just any game." He had looked at me, his expression serious. To them, some games are not just any game. I insisted he was being silly. This was different. This was monumental. They had talked for months about holding their grandbaby for the first time, about the pictures they would take, about the stories they would tell their friends. My mom had even bought a special grandma's first cuddle outfit to wear at the hospital. The evidence of their excitement was all there. I clung to it, using it as a shield against the small, nagging voice in my head that sounded a lot like Liam. My due date came and went. The days stretched on, each one filled with a new level of anxious waiting. And then, early one Tuesday morning, it started. The contractions were mild at first, like gentle waves. I woke Liam, and his eyes shot open, instantly alert. "Is it time?" he whispered. I nodded, a smile spreading across my face despite the tightening in my belly. It was time. We followed the plan. I took a warm shower while Liam made the calls. He called the hospital. He called his parents, who lived a few states away, but promised to book the next flight. And then he called my parents. I could hear his side of the conversation from the bathroom. "She's in labor," he said, his voice calm but laced with excitement. "The contractions are still far apart, but her doctor said to come in. We're heading to the hospital now." He paused, listening. "Okay, great. We'll see you there soon." He came into the bathroom as I was toweling off. "They're on their way," he said, wrapping his arms around me. They sounded so excited. Your mom was squealing. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Of course they were. Liam had been wrong. They wouldn't miss this. They were on their way. The drive to the hospital was a blur of traffic lights and deep breaths. The contractions were getting stronger, closer together. We checked in, and the nurses settled me into a room. It was all happening so fast. A nurse checked my progress. "You're moving right along," she said kindly. "It won't be too long now." Hours passed. Liam was a rock. He held my hand through every contraction, fed me ice chips, and whispered words of encouragement. He was everything I needed him to be. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room. I looked at the clock on the wall. It had been nearly 10 hours since we arrived. My parents lived only 45 minutes away. Even with traffic, they should have been here long ago. Have you heard from my mom? I asked Liam between pants. He shook his head, his brow furrowed with worry. I've tried calling a few times. It goes straight to voicemail. A spike of fear, cold and sharp, cut through the pain of the contraction. What if something happened? I asked, my voice trembling. What if they got in an accident? Hey, don't think like that, Liam said, his voice firm but gentle. Their phone probably died. They're probably in the waiting room right now and the nurses haven't told us. I'll go check. He kissed my forehead and slipped out of the room. He came back a few minutes later, his face grim. They're not here. The fear intensified. All sorts of terrible scenarios played out in my mind. A car crash, a sudden medical emergency. My parents were getting older. Anything could have happened. The physical pain of labor was suddenly matched by a twisting, agonizing emotional pain. I was worried sick. Keep trying to call them, I pleaded with Liam. And call my brother Mark. See if he's heard from them. Liam pulled out his phone and started dialing. I tried to focus on my breathing, on the nurse's instructions, but a part of my mind was far away, lost in a spiral of worry for my parents. The baby was coming. The doctor told me it was time to push, and in that intense, primal, all-consuming moment, the world narrowed to just me, Liam, and the life we were bringing into the world. And then he was here, our son, Daniel. He was perfect. He had a full head of dark hair and the most piercing blue eyes. The nurse laid him on my chest and I cried. Tears of joy, of relief, of overwhelming, unconditional love. Liam was crying too, his hand stroking my hair as we looked at our son in awe. For a few perfect, blissful moments, I forgot everything else. I forgot about the pain, the exhaustion, and the worry. It was just the three of us, a family. After they had cleaned Daniel up and swaddled him in a blanket, the exhaustion hit me like a physical blow. Liam was holding our son, looking down at him with an expression of pure adoration. It was then that the worry for my parents crept back in. Any word? I asked softly. Liam's face tightened. I've been trying them. Still no answer. I left a message with Mark, but he hasn't called back yet. The joy of the moment was suddenly tainted. My son was here, healthy and beautiful, and his grandparents were missing. The people who had promised they wouldn't miss it for the world were nowhere to be found. I tried to push the dark thoughts away, to focus on the miracle in my arms, but the question echoed in my mind. Where were they? An hour later, as I was trying to get Daniel to latch for the first time, Liam's phone buzzed on the bedside table. He picked it up, his expression hopeful. It's Mark, he said. He answered it, but before he could even say hello, my phone, which was next to his, buzzed with a text message. It was also from Mark. I was too tired to pick it up, focusing on my son. I listened to Liam's side of the conversation. Mark? Hey, is everything okay? We've been so worried, Liam said. He paused. Oh, okay. No, we hadn't heard. Are they all right? Another pause. Yeah, she's exhausted, but she's okay. And the baby is perfect. A boy. We named him Daniel. Liam's voice was strained. Okay. Well, tell them we're glad they're safe. Talk to you later. He hung up the phone, his face a mask of controlled anger. What is it? I asked, my heart sinking. What happened? Your parents are fine, he said, his voice flat. According to Mark, there was a massive pileup on the freeway. They were stuck for hours. They're at home now. Your mom is too distraught to talk. I felt a confusing mix of relief and annoyance. Relief that they were safe. Annoyance that they had been stuck in traffic for the entire birth. A massive pileup. It must have been truly terrible. Oh, wow, I said. Poor them. That's awful. Are they okay? They're fine, Liam repeated, but he wouldn't look at me. He was staring at my phone on the nightstand. You should read the text Mark sent you. His tone was strange, cold. I gently laid Daniel in the bassinet next to the bed and reached for my phone. My hands were shaking slightly from exhaustion. I unlocked the screen and opened the message from my brother. It wasn't a message meant for me. It was clearly intended for one of his friends. My blood ran cold as I read the words. Can't believe they're actually doing it. Watching the '98 championship rerun instead of going to the hospital. Dad's recording it, but says, "The live feel is everything." Hilarious. I read it again, and a third time. The words swam before my eyes, blurring together. Hilarious. The live feel is everything. A rerun. They missed the birth of my son, their first grandchild, to watch a recording of a football game that had happened decades ago. They hadn't been in a car accident. They hadn't been stuck in a horrific traffic jam. They had been at home, on their couch, watching television. The phone slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the floor. Liam was by my side in an instant, his arms around me. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I was numb, frozen in a state of shock and a betrayal so profound it felt like a physical wound. They hadn't just missed it. They had chosen to miss it. They had lied about it. And my brother, my own brother, thought it was hilarious. They chose a game, I whispered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. A rerun of a game. I know, Liam said, his voice thick with anger. I'm so sorry, Chloe. I'm so sorry. I stared at the wall, at the cheerful, generic hospital art. The joy I had felt just an hour ago was gone, replaced by a hollow, aching emptiness. My son was here, a perfect, beautiful boy. And the first story I would have to tell him about his grandparents was the story of how they decided a football game was more important than his arrival into the world. The promise of "wouldn't miss it for the world" was just another empty phrase, as meaningless as their excitement, as fake as the grandma's first cuddle outfit that was probably still hanging in my mother's closet. The calm sea was over. The storm had arrived, but it wasn't the one I had been expecting. This was a different kind of storm. A quiet, cold, and devastating one. And in that moment, I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that things would never, ever be the same. I didn't respond to Mark's text. I didn't say another word about it to Liam. I just lay there, the silence in the room thick and heavy. Every time I looked at my beautiful, sleeping son, a fresh wave of hurt washed over me. He deserved grandparents who would move mountains to be there for him, not ones who couldn't be bothered to turn off the television. Liam must have sensed my retreat into myself. He didn't push. He simply sat with me, his presence a quiet, solid comfort in the wreckage of my expectations. The next morning, my phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the decline button. A part of me wanted to ignore her forever, to cut her out of my life completely. But another, more calculating part of me, a part I hadn't known existed until that moment, whispered that I needed to hear the lie. I needed to hear it from her own mouth. I took a breath and answered. Hello? Chloe, honey? Oh, thank goodness, she gushed, her voice a performance of frantic relief and exhaustion. We were so worried. How are you? How's the baby? Is it a boy or a girl? The questions were a rapid-fire assault of feigned ignorance. Mark had already told them. They knew. It's a boy, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. We're both fine. A boy? Oh, a grandson. Your father will be so thrilled, she chirped. Then her tone shifted to one of deep, theatrical tragedy. Honey, I am so sorry we weren't there. You will not believe what happened. It was the most horrific traffic jam I have ever seen. A multi-car pileup on the freeway. We were at a complete standstill for hours. Just hours. We didn't move an inch. Our phones died. It was a nightmare. We feel absolutely terrible. I listened to the story, each word a small, sharp prick against my already wounded heart. She wasn't just lying. She was embellishing. She was painting a vivid picture of their supposed ordeal, all to cover up their selfish choice. Oh no, I said, my voice carefully neutral. Was everyone okay in the accident? It was a test. A small, simple question to see how far she would take the fabrication. Oh, it looked awful, she said, her voice dropping to a somber whisper. Ambulances, fire trucks, the works. We were too far back to see the worst of it, thank heavens, but it was just terrible. We were beside ourselves, knowing you were here alone. Alone. The word hung in the air. I wasn't alone. I had Liam. I had the nurses and the doctor. The only people missing were the ones who chose to be. Well, I'm glad you're safe, I said, the words feeling foreign and false on my tongue. We'll come to the hospital this afternoon, she promised. We just need to rest for a bit. We're so emotionally drained from the whole ordeal. We can't wait to meet our grandson. Okay, Mom, I said. We'll be here. I hung up the phone and looked at Liam. He had been listening, his expression growing darker with every word my mother spoke. A multi-car pileup, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. She's quite the storyteller. She is, I agreed. A cold resolve was beginning to form in my chest, pushing aside the initial shock and pain. They had made their choice. Now I would make mine. Liam, I said, my voice quiet but firm. Could you do something for me? Could you check the traffic archives for yesterday? Look for any news reports about a major pileup on the freeway they would have taken. Liam's eyes met mine, and he nodded slowly. He understood. This wasn't just about catching them in a lie anymore. This was about gathering evidence. This was about building a case. He pulled out his laptop and started typing. I watched him, the rhythmic clicking of the keys a counterpoint to the soft, gentle breathing of my son. The world had shifted on its axis. The daughter who had always made excuses for her parents was gone. In her place was a mother, and a mother's first instinct is to protect her child. I would protect my son from their selfishness, from their casual disregard. I would protect him from the disappointment I was feeling right now. Liam worked for about 20 minutes. He searched news sites, traffic authority websites, and social media. Finally, he turned the laptop towards me. Nothing, he said. Not a single thing. There were the usual minor slowdowns during rush hour, but no multi-car pileups, no major accidents reported on that freeway at all yesterday. It was a clear run. I stared at the screen. There it was. The proof. The undeniable black and white confirmation of their lie. It wasn't just a white lie to spare my feelings. It was a calculated, elaborate deception designed to absolve them of all responsibility. The cold resolve in my chest hardened into something that felt like steel. The hurt was still there, a deep, throbbing ache, but it was now overlaid with a layer of pure, unadulterated anger. How dare they? How dare they treat me with such contempt? How dare they think I was so stupid, so gullible, that I would just accept their ridiculous story without question? My next move was to call my brother. I needed to hear his version of the lie. I needed to see if their stories matched. I waited until I was sure he would be on his lunch break at work. Then I dialed his number. He answered on the second ring. Chloe, hey, I was just about to call you. Congratulations. His voice was overly cheerful, too loud. He was nervous. Thanks, Mark, I said, keeping my tone level. I'm just calling because I was worried. Mom told me about the accident yesterday. She sounded really shaken up. Are they really okay? There was a slight pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head as he tried to remember the script. Oh, yeah, the accident, he said. Yeah, it was crazy. They were stuck for ages. A jackknife truck, I think Dad said. Blocked all the lanes. A jackknife truck, not a multi-car pileup. The inconsistency was small, but it was there. A crack in their flimsy story. They hadn't even bothered to get their lies straight. Mom said it was a pileup, I said, my voice still carefully neutral. Oh, right. Yeah, a pileup caused by the truck, he said quickly, scrambling to patch the hole. It was a whole mess. But yeah, they're fine. Just bummed they missed everything. They feel awful. I'm sure they do, I said. The words were laced with an irony so thick I was surprised he couldn't taste it. Well, I just wanted to check. I have to go, the nurse is here. Okay, talk soon. Love you, he said and hung up before I could reply. I put the phone down, my hand steady. The picture was becoming clearer. They had made a selfish decision. They had concocted a lie to cover it up. And they had enlisted my brother, their golden child, to perpetuate that lie. He wasn't just an amused bystander. He was an active participant in their deception. The thought of his hilarious text message flashed in my mind again. He wasn't just covering for them. He was mocking me. Liam looked at me, his eyes questioning. A jackknife truck? He guessed. I nodded. Caused a pileup, apparently. He let out a short, bitter laugh. They're not even good at this. No, I said. They're not. That afternoon, my parents arrived. They swept into the hospital room with a gust of fake apologies and overwrought emotions. My mother was carrying a ridiculously large teddy bear, so big it partially obscured her face. My father followed behind her, his expression a carefully crafted mask of somber regret. There he is, my mother exclaimed, rushing over to the bassinet. Oh, Chloe, he's beautiful. He looks just like your father. I said nothing. I just watched her. She cooed over Daniel for a moment before turning her attention to me. She rushed to my bedside and grabbed my hand. Her hand was cold. Honey, we are just sick about yesterday, she said, her eyes welling up with crocodile tears. To be stuck in that traffic knowing you were here, it was torture. Absolute torture. My father nodded grimly. Worst traffic I've seen in 30 years, he muttered. A complete standstill. I looked from my mother's tear-streaked face to my father's solemn one. I thought about the text message. I thought about the clear traffic reports. I thought about the conflicting stories. And I felt nothing but a cold, hard anger. They weren't just liars. They were performers, and they were putting on the show of their lives. I'm glad you're okay, I said, my voice flat. It was the only thing I could manage to say. They took my emotional flatness as exhaustion. They bustled around the room, my mother adjusting my pillows, my father peering awkwardly at his new grandson. They were acting out the role of doting, concerned grandparents, and they expected me to play my part as the grateful, tired new mother. But I couldn't do it. The script had been thrown out. The daughter they had expected to see was gone. I looked at them, at these two people who had raised me, and I felt like I was seeing them for the first time. I saw their selfishness, their casual cruelty, their profound disrespect for me and my family. My mother must have sensed the shift in the atmosphere. She stopped fussing and looked at me, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Are you all right, sweetie? You seem quiet. I'm just tired, I lied. It was my turn to lie now, but my lies had a purpose. My lies were a shield. Theirs were a weapon. They stayed for an hour of stilted conversation and forced smiles. I answered their questions in monosyllables. I didn't offer to let them hold the baby. I just held him close to my chest, a silent, protective barrier between my son and their deception. When they finally left, promising to come back the next day, the relief I felt was immense. The air in the room seemed to clear, to become breathable again. Liam came and sat on the edge of my bed. How are you doing? He asked softly. I'm angry, I said, the words finally coming out. I'm so angry. It's not just that they missed it, it's the lie. It's the way they think I'm an idiot. The way they performed for me, expecting me to just buy it. I know, he said, taking my hand. His was warm. What do you want to do? I looked down at Daniel, sleeping peacefully in my arms. His tiny face was so innocent, so pure. He deserved so much better. I don't know yet, I said. But I know this. They don't get to just sweep this under the rug. They don't get to pretend this didn't happen. There have to be consequences. The seed of a plan was beginning to sprout in my mind. It was a cold, hard, and unforgiving plan. It was a plan born of betrayal. They wanted to be seen as the perfect grandparents. They cared about their image, about what their friends and family thought of them. And I realized, with a sudden, chilling clarity, that their image was their greatest vulnerability. It was the one thing they valued more than anything. And it was the one thing I now had the power to destroy. The next few days in the hospital passed in a haze of feeding, changing, and sleeping. Liam's parents arrived, flying in from out of state. The moment they walked into the room, the contrast was staggering. My mother-in-law, Susan, burst into happy tears the moment she saw Daniel. My father-in-law, Tom, beamed, his pride evident on his face. They didn't come with giant impersonal teddy bears. They came with a home-cooked meal for me and Liam, and a small hand-knitted blanket for the baby. "Oh, Chloe, he's just perfect," Susan said, her voice thick with genuine emotion as she held Daniel for the first time. "You did such an amazing job." They stayed for hours, but their presence wasn't draining like my own parents had been. It was supportive. They asked how I was feeling, really feeling. They offered to let us sleep while they watched the baby. They were present, in every sense of the word. During their visit, Susan asked the inevitable question. "Have your parents been by much?" "I bet they're just over the moon." I hesitated for a fraction of a second. Liam shot me a quick, supportive glance. I decided to stick to the vague truth for now. "They were held up on the day he was born," I said, choosing my words carefully. "They've been by once since then." Susan's brow furrowed slightly. "Oh, that's a shame they missed the big moment. Was everything all right?" "They said there was bad traffic," I replied, my voice neutral. I left it at that. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Her expression was one of polite sympathy, but I could see the questions in her eyes. Grandparents who lived less than an hour away, missing the birth and only visiting once? It didn't add up. My own parents called every day, their voices dripping with fake concern. "How's our little champion?" my father would ask. "Is he sleeping through the night yet?" The questions were generic, the kind of things they thought grandparents were supposed to say. They never asked about the birth itself. They never asked for the story of how it all happened. They avoided the topic completely, hoping their grand performance and the passage of a few days would be enough to erase their transgression. I played along on the phone, giving them short, non-committal answers. But with every conversation, the steel in my spine grew colder and stronger. I was no longer just angry. I was strategic. I was waiting. My friend Sarah, my best friend since childhood, was my lifeline. I had texted her from the hospital, telling her everything. Her responses were a string of furious, capitalized messages. She was more outraged than I was, if that was even possible. "A rerun?" one text read. "Are you kidding me?" "I'm going to call your mother myself." "Don't," I texted back. "I have a plan." When I got home from the hospital, Sarah was the first person I confided in about the next step. We sat at my kitchen table, a sleeping Daniel in a carrier between us, while Liam was at the grocery store. "So, what's the plan?" she asked, her eyes narrowed with determination. "Are you going to confront them?" "Not yet," I said. A direct confrontation right now would just be a shouting match. They would deny it, call me crazy, and try to gaslight me. I need more than just Mark's text and a lack of traffic reports. I need something they can't possibly deny. "Like what?" she asked. "Like a confession," I said. "Or the next best thing. I need to find out exactly what they were thinking." Sarah looked at me, intrigued. "How are you going to do that?" "I'm going to do what you suggested in the hospital," I said. "I'm going to check their social media, not their public-facing pages. I need to go deeper." My father was a creature of habit. For years, he had been an active member of a die-hard fan forum for his football team. He had a username I had overheard him mention once, something ridiculous like Gridiron General 72. He thought no one in the family knew about it. He used it to vent about coaching decisions, argue with other fans, and apparently to brag about his life choices. You think he posted about it? Sarah asked, her eyes wide. My dad loves to brag, I said. He especially loves to brag to a crowd of people who share his obsession. If he made a choice to prioritize a game over his grandson, he'd see it as a mark of ultimate fandom. He'd want to tell his buddies on the forum. It was a long shot, but it was the only lead I had. That night, after Liam and the baby were asleep, I sat in the dark living room with my laptop. My heart was pounding as I navigated to the forum's website. It was an old, clunky-looking site, a relic of the early internet. I found the search bar and typed in his username. His profile popped up immediately. A pixelated team logo served as his avatar. I clicked on his post history. I scrolled back, my eyes scanning the dates. And then I saw it. A post from the day Daniel was born. The timestamp was from the early evening, right around the time I had been in the most intense stage of labor. The thread was titled, Ultimate Fan Dilemma. My blood ran cold. I clicked on it. The post was short, but it was more damning than anything I could have imagined. He wrote, Got a choice to make today, boys. The grandkid's making his debut, or I can watch the '98 Championship Classic in all its glory. The wife is on board. We're staying home. Some things are a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Don't tell my daughter LOL. The LOL at the end was what broke me. It was a punch to the gut. The casual, dismissive lol. He wasn't conflicted. He wasn't torn. He thought it was funny. A joke. A hilarious anecdote to share with his online friends. He had sacrificed the birth of his first grandchild for a moment of clout on a football forum. And my mother. The wife is on board. She wasn't just a passive bystander. She was a willing participant. Her tears, her story about the traffic, her performance of being emotionally drained. It was all a lie. A carefully constructed act to hide their callous, selfish decision. I took a screenshot of the post, then another for good measure. I saved the image to my desktop, to my phone, and to a cloud drive. This was it. This was the key. This was the undeniable proof, in his own words. There was no denying this. There was no spinning it. There was no lolling his way out of it. I closed the laptop, my hands trembling. The anger was gone, replaced by a profound and chilling calm. The hurt was still there, a deep, permanent scar on my heart, but it no longer controlled me. I was in control now. I had the text from my brother. I had the search history of the clear traffic reports. And now, I had my father's own words, a digital confession signed with a laughing acronym. The plan, which had been a vague outline in my mind, now snapped into sharp focus. They had cared more about a game than about me. They had cared more about their image than about the truth. I would use their own priorities against them. I would stage a confrontation, but not a private one. A private confrontation would allow them to lie and manipulate. No, this had to be public. It had to be in front of the very people whose opinions they valued. I thought about the welcome home party they had been pestering me about. My mother had been calling, suggesting a small get-together for the family to officially meet Daniel. She wanted to invite my aunts, uncles, and a few of her close friends. She wanted to create the perfect photo opportunity to cement their image as doting grandparents. It will be so lovely, she had said on the phone just that morning. We can all finally celebrate properly. I had been non-committal, telling her I was still too tired to think about a party. But now I saw it for what it was, the perfect stage. It was the stage they wanted, the one they were trying to build for their own vanity, and I was going to burn it to the ground. Okay, Mom, I said when she called the next day to ask again. Let's have the party. I could hear the relief and excitement in her voice. Oh, wonderful, Chloe. I'll start making calls. This Saturday? Saturday is perfect, I said, my voice sweet as sugar. The trap was set. All they had to do was walk into it, and I knew with absolute certainty that they would. Their egos wouldn't let them do anything else. They would walk right into the fire, smiling for the cameras, completely unaware that I was the one holding the match. The days leading up to the party were surreal. My mother was in her element, calling me constantly with updates. "Aunt Carol is so excited to come," she'd say. And I told my friend Brenda all about her new grandnephew, and she can't wait to see the pictures. Every word was a confirmation of my theory. This party wasn't for me or for Daniel. It was for them. It was a public relations campaign. I let her plan everything. I agreed to the time, the guest list, even the type of cake she wanted to order. I was the model of a cooperative, forgiving daughter. On the outside. On the inside, I was a general preparing for battle. I went over the plan with Liam, showing him the screenshot of my father's forum post. He read it, and a muscle in his jaw clenched. "Unbelievable," he breathed. "He's proud of it." "He is," I confirmed. "He thinks it makes him the ultimate fan, and Mom is his co-conspirator." "So, the party," Liam said, looking at me. "Are you sure you want to do this? It's going to be brutal." "I'm sure," I said, my voice steady. "They've spent my whole life making me feel small, making me feel like I'm second best to their hobbies. They humiliated me on the most important day of my life, and then they lied to my face and laughed about it behind my back. This isn't just about revenge, Liam. It's about setting a boundary so high they can never cross it again. It's about showing them, and everyone else, who they really are." He nodded, his eyes filled with a fierce loyalty that made my heart ache with love for him. "Okay," he said. "I'm with you. 100%. What do you need me to do?" "Just be there," I said. "And have your phone ready. I want a recording of this." The day of the party arrived. Our house, which had been a quiet sanctuary for me, Liam, and Daniel, was suddenly filled with people. My aunts and uncles arrived, bearing gifts and cooing over the baby. My mother's friends, Brenda and Janet, came in, their faces plastered with polite smiles. My brother Mark showed up, looking slightly uncomfortable. He avoided my gaze. And then, my parents made their grand entrance. My mother was wearing a new dress and a bright, beaming smile. My father followed, looking proud and magnanimous, the lord of the manor. They worked the room like politicians, accepting congratulations, telling everyone how thrilled they were. "Isn't he just the most beautiful baby you've ever seen?" my mother said to Aunt Carol, who was holding Daniel. "We are just so in love." I watched them from the kitchen, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. I felt a momentary flicker of doubt. Could I really do this? Could I really blow up my family in front of everyone? Then I looked at Daniel, sleeping peacefully in his aunt's arms, and the resolve returned. This was for him. This was to protect him from a lifetime of the casual cruelty I had endured. I waited for the right moment. I let them bask in the glory for a full hour. I watched them pose for photos with Daniel, my mother holding him up like a trophy. They were creating their narrative, building their perfect grandparent facade, brick by brick. Finally, my mother gathered everyone in the living room. "I just want to say a few words," she announced, her voice ringing with false emotion. She raised a glass of sparkling cider. "To my daughter, Chloe, and my wonderful son-in-law, Liam, and to our beautiful new grandson, Daniel, your father and I are just so full of joy. Our only regret is that we couldn't be there for his grand arrival. As some of you know, we had a bit of a traumatic experience that day." Here it comes, I thought. The performance. She launched into the story of the traffic jam. It was even more dramatic this time. She added new details: a life flight helicopter, weeping motorists, a heroic policeman who had told them it was the worst wreck he'd seen in his career. She was a master storyteller. Everyone was listening, their faces full of sympathy. Aunt Carol looked horrified. My mother's friends were shaking their heads in pity. "We were just trapped," my mother concluded, dabbing at a dry eye with her napkin. "It was agonizing, knowing we were missing the most important moment. We were just heartbroken." She looked at me, expecting me to nod along, to validate her story. The room was silent, everyone's eyes on me. This was it, my moment. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my water. I set the glass down on the coffee table with a soft click. "That's a very dramatic story, Mom," I said, my voice clear and calm. It cut through the somber mood in the room like a knife. My mother's smile faltered. "Well, it was a very dramatic experience, honey." "It's just strange," I continued, looking around the room, making eye contact with Aunt Carol, with my brother, because it's not what happened at all. A confused murmur went through the room. My father, who had been standing by the fireplace looking solemn, straightened up, his eyes narrowing. "What are you talking about? Chloe?" he demanded, his voice sharp. I ignored him and kept my eyes on my mother. "You weren't in a traffic jam," I said, my voice still quiet, but carrying to every corner of the room. "You were at home, on your couch." My mother let out a nervous laugh. "Chloe, honey, I think you must be confused. The exhaustion from the baby, maybe. We were most certainly not at home." "Oh, I'm not confused at all," I said. I pulled out my phone. "I know exactly where you were. You were watching a rerun of the 1998 football championship." The silence in the room was absolute. It was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. My brother Mark's face went completely white. He looked like he was going to be sick. "That is a ridiculous and hurtful accusation," my father boomed, stepping forward. "Your mother and I were stuck on the freeway, and I will not have you disrespect her like this." "Was it a multi-car pileup, Dad?" I asked, turning my gaze to him. "Or was it a jackknife truck? You and Mom and Mark can't seem to get your stories straight, but that's what happens with lies, isn't it? The details get fuzzy." My mother's face had crumpled. The mask of the doting, heartbroken grandmother was gone, replaced by a pinched, furious expression. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "In front of our family and friends?" "You were the one who wanted the audience," I said simply. Then I looked at my brother. "Isn't that right, Mark? You thought it was hilarious. You even texted me about it by accident." Mark flinched as if I had struck him. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He just stared at me, his eyes wide with panic. "This is absurd," my father blustered, his face turning a deep, mottled red. "She's making this up. She's overtired and emotional." "Am I?" I asked. I held up my phone, my hand perfectly steady. "Then maybe you can explain this." I turned the screen so everyone could see the screenshot of his forum post. I read the words out loud, my voice ringing with clarity in the silent room. "Got a choice to make today, boys. The grandkid's making his debut, or I can watch the '98 Championship Classic in all its glory. The wife is on board. We're staying home. Some things are a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Don't tell my daughter, LOL." I let the last word hang in the air. "LOL." The effect was instantaneous and devastating. Aunt Carol gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She looked from the phone to my father, her expression one of utter disbelief and disgust. My mother's friends, Brenda and Janet, were staring at my parents, their polite smiles gone, replaced by looks of shock and judgment. Liam was standing by the doorway, his phone held up, recording everything. My father was speechless. He stared at the phone, then at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. The blustering anger was gone, replaced by the pale, slack-jawed look of a man who had been caught, red-handed and with no escape. My mother was the first to find her voice. But it wasn't a voice of apology or remorse. It was a voice of pure, unadulterated rage. "How could you?" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. "How could you do this to us? You saved that? You planned this? This was a setup." "Yes," I said calmly. "It was. You wanted a party to show everyone what wonderful grandparents you are. I just decided to show them the truth instead." "You're right, Dad," I said, turning to him. "Some things are a once-in-a-lifetime experience. The birth of my son was one of them. And you missed it. You chose to miss it. For a football game that you had on tape. It was the principle of the thing. My father finally managed to sputter, his voice a pathetic squeak. It was a classic game. A piece of history. He is my son, I said, my voice dropping low. And you chose a piece of history over a piece of your family. That's your right. But lying about it is not. And expecting me to play along with your lies is not. This party is over. No one moved. They were all frozen, staring at my parents. The perfect facade had not just cracked. It had been shattered into a million pieces. The doting grandparents had been exposed as selfish, deceitful people who had been caught in a pathetic, easily disproven lie. My mother burst into tears, but they were tears of fury and humiliation, not sadness. You have ruined everything, she sobbed. No, I said, my voice as cold and hard as the steel in my spine. You did. You ruined it the moment you decided a television was more important than your daughter. Slowly, people started to move. Aunt Carol walked over to me, placed a hand on my arm, and squeezed. I am so sorry, Chloe, she whispered, her eyes full of pity, not for my parents, but for me. She then turned and walked out the door without another word to my mother, her sister. Brenda and Janet gathered their purses, avoiding my parents' eyes, and mumbled their goodbyes as they scurried out. My other relatives followed, one by one, their faces a mixture of embarrassment and disgust. Soon, the only people left in the room were me, Liam, a still sleeping Daniel, and my two parents and brother, standing amidst the ruins of their own making. Mark finally looked at me, his face full of shame. Chloe, he started. Don't, I cut him off. Just don't. My father finally seemed to grasp the enormity of what had just happened. His reputation, his image in front of his family and friends, was destroyed. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw not anger, but something that looked like fear in his eyes. He had lost control of the narrative. He had lost, and he knew it. My mother, however, still had some fight left. You think you've won, don't you? She sneered through her tears. You've humiliated us. You've turned our family against us. I hope you're happy. I looked at her, at the woman who had given me life and then treated that life as a secondary concern. I felt a strange sense of detachment, of finality. This wasn't about winning, I said. This was about truth. Now, I think it's time for you to go. They stood there for a moment longer, stunned. Then, defeated, they turned and walked out of my house. I watched them go, and as Liam closed the door behind them, I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I felt a vast, empty quiet. The battle was over. But I knew the war was just beginning. The week after the disastrous party was eerily silent. My parents didn't call. They didn't text. It was as if they had fallen off the face of the earth. The silence was a relief, a much-needed balm on the raw wound of the confrontation. Liam and I settled into our new life with Daniel, the quiet rhythm of our days punctuated by feedings and diaper changes, not by my mother's demanding phone calls or my father's self-important pronouncements. The fallout from the party, however, was rippling through the family. Aunt Carol called me the next day. Chloe, I just wanted to call and see how you are, she said, her voice gentle. And to tell you, I am so proud of you. That took incredible courage. I was just so tired of the lies, Aunt Carol, I confessed. I know, honey, she said, and I could hear the sadness in her voice. Your mother, she's always been obsessed with appearances, and your father gets lost in his own world. I've seen it for years, but I never thought they would go this far. To miss the birth of their own grandchild, and then to lie about it so brazenly. I'm just speechless. You and me both, I said with a humorless laugh. Well, for what it's worth, she continued, you did the right thing. They needed to be called out. My phone has been ringing all morning. Your Uncle Mike is furious with them. The story is out, Chloe, and no one is on their side. That small piece of information was a comfort. I hadn't just been screaming into the void. People had listened. They had understood. My brother, Mark, sent me a long, rambling text message a few days later. It was a pathetic mix of apology and excuse. "Chloe, I am so sorry," it began. "I never should have gone along with it. I just didn't want to rock the boat. You know how they get. They put me in an impossible position. I feel terrible. I should have been there for you. I love you and I want to be in my nephew's life." I read the message and felt a flicker of pity for him, but it was quickly extinguished by the memory of his hilarious text. He wasn't a child. He was a grown man who had made a choice. He had chosen to enable them, to laugh at my expense. I replied with a single sentence. "Your actions have consequences, Mark." I didn't hear from him again. The peace was broken exactly 1 week after the party. My phone rang, and it was my mother. I hesitated, then answered, putting the phone on speaker so Liam could hear. "Chloe," she said. Her voice was different. The theatrical emotion was gone, replaced by a cold, businesslike tone. "We need to talk." "I'm listening," I said. "Your father and I have been discussing the situation," she began, as if she were talking about a corporate merger. "What you did at that party was cruel and unforgivable. You deliberately set out to humiliate us, and you succeeded. Our friends are barely speaking to us. Your aunt is spreading vicious gossip. You have created a mess. A huge mess." I waited. I knew this wasn't an apology call. "However," she continued, "we are willing to find a way to move forward, for the sake of the family, and for Daniel's sake. He deserves to have grandparents. He deserves grandparents who show up for him," I said, my voice level. She ignored my comment. "We have a proposal. It's the only way to fix this. The only way to put this behind us and repair the damage you have caused." I gripped the phone tighter. "What is your proposal?" "We want to do a do-over," she said, the words sounding utterly absurd. "We will hire a professional photographer. We will come to your house. You will dress Daniel in a nice outfit, and we will stage a first meeting photo shoot. We will get beautiful pictures of us holding him for the first time. We can post them on social media. We can send them to the family. We can create a new story, a happy story. We can pretend this whole ugly mess never happened." I was so stunned I couldn't speak. Liam stared at me, his mouth agape in disbelief. A do-over. They wanted to literally rewrite history. They wanted me to be an active participant in an even bigger, more elaborate lie. A lie designed not to spare my feelings, but to salvage their precious public image. "Let me get this straight," I said, finding my voice. "You want me to lie for you? You want me to help you create fake evidence so that everyone will think you're the loving grandparents you've been pretending to be?" "It's not lying, Chloe," she said, her voice taking on a sharp, impatient edge. "It's a recreation. It's for the good of the family. It's the only way to make this right. People will see the beautiful photos and they'll forget all about this other nonsense. It's a clean slate." "A clean slate?" I repeated, the words tasting like poison. "You think a photo shoot can erase what you did? You think a picture can make up for the fact that you chose a television show over the birth of your grandson?" "It was a mistake," she snapped. "A stupid mistake. But you are blowing it completely out of proportion. You are being vindictive and cruel, and you are punishing us for one little lapse in judgment." "A lapse in judgment is forgetting to pick up milk at the store," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "Missing your first grandchild's birth for a football game and then creating an elaborate lie about a tragic accident is not a little lapse in judgment. It's a fundamental statement of your priorities, and I am not on the list." "This is your fault," she suddenly shrieked, the cold facade cracking. "If you hadn't been so dramatic, if you had just accepted our apology for the traffic—" "The fake traffic," I shot back. "There was no traffic. You lied." "It doesn't matter," she yelled. "You have a choice here, Chloe. You can either help us fix this, or you can be responsible for tearing this family apart for good. We are giving you a chance to make things right. Take the pictures with us. That's all we're asking. I took a deep breath, the anger a hot fire in my chest. I looked at Liam, who just shook his head slowly, his eyes full of disgust. No, I said, my voice dropping to a low, final tone. The answer is no. There are no do-overs. There are no staged photo shoots. There are no more lies. You made your choice on the day my son was born, and now you have to live with it. The real version of it, not the one you want to invent for your Facebook friends. There was a stunned silence on the other end. Then, my father's voice came on the line. It was shaking with rage. You will regret this, Chloe, he seethed. You think you're so high and mighty sitting in judgment of us, but you're just a cruel, unforgiving little girl. We are your parents. We gave you everything. You gave me a masterclass in selfishness, I retorted, and for that I thank you. You've taught me exactly what kind of parent I never want to be. Do not call me again with this ridiculous demand. We are done talking about this. I hung up the phone. My hand was trembling. I looked at Liam. A do-over, he said, his voice a mixture of awe and disgust. The audacity is just breathtaking. They don't get it, I said, sinking onto the couch. They will never get it. They don't think they did anything wrong. They're just angry that they got caught. The demand for a do-over was the final straw. It was the ultimate confirmation that they felt no remorse, only regret for their tarnished image. My anger, which had been a hot, burning fire, now cooled into something different. It was a resolve as hard and as cold as granite. They had drawn their line in the sand. Now I would draw mine. The next few weeks were a new kind of battle. Having failed to persuade me, my parents switched tactics. They began a campaign of emotional blackmail, enlisting my brother as their primary soldier. Mark called me. Chloe, you're not being fair, he pleaded. They're a mess. Mom cries all the time. Dad just sits in his chair and stares at the wall. You've destroyed them. They destroyed themselves, Mark, I said, my voice weary. And you helped. I know, I messed up, he said quickly. But can't you just do this one thing? It's just pictures. It would mean so much to them. It would help things get back to normal. Normal was me accepting their selfishness, I replied. Normal was me making excuses for them. I'm not going back to normal. Daniel deserves a new normal. One where the people in his life are honest and show up for him. So you're just going to cut them out? He asked, his voice rising in frustration. Over a stupid football game? It was never about the game, Mark, and you know it, I said. It was about the choice, the lie, the disrespect. And now it's about their absolute refusal to take any responsibility. They don't want a relationship with me or my son. They want a photo album. I can't give them that. You're being stubborn, he accused. I'm setting a boundary, I corrected him. You should try it sometime. Goodbye, Mark. I hung up before he could argue further. The conversation left me feeling drained and sad. I mourned the relationship I thought I had with my brother. It was now clear that his loyalty would always lie with my parents, not because he believed they were right, but because it was easier than standing up to them. Then the pressure started coming from other, more unexpected places. My mother's best friend, Janet, the one who had scurried out of the party in embarrassment, sent me a long, sanctimonious email. Dear Chloe, it read, I am writing to you as someone who has known your mother for 30 years. She is a good person with a good heart, and she is absolutely devastated by this situation. While I don't condone what they did, I think you are handling this with a shocking lack of grace and forgiveness. Family is everything, and you are throwing yours away over a moment of foolishness. Your mother told me about her offer of a photo shoot, a beautiful gesture of reconciliation, and you threw it back in her face. I urge you to reconsider. Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. For the sake of your new baby, you need to let this go and make peace. I read the email twice, my jaw tightening with each word. A beautiful gesture of reconciliation? They had demanded I participate in a lie to save their own skins. They had framed it as something they were doing for me, for the family. The manipulation was so transparent, so insulting. I deleted the email without replying. The only unwavering support came from Liam, his parents, Sarah, and Aunt Carol. "Don't you dare let them get to you," Sarah said fiercely over the phone. "They're trying to reframe this to make you the bad guy. It's classic narcissist behavior. They create the problem, and then they blame you for reacting to it." Liam's mother, Susan, was a quiet but powerful source of strength. "You are Daniel's mother," she told me gently one afternoon while she was visiting. "You get to decide who is in his life and on what terms. Don't ever let anyone make you feel guilty for protecting your child." Her words were exactly what I needed to hear. I was not being cruel or unforgiving. I was being a mother. The final confrontation happened about a month after Daniel was born. It was a Saturday afternoon. Liam and I were in the living room playing with Daniel on his activity mat when the doorbell rang. We weren't expecting anyone. Liam went to the door and I saw his shoulders tense. "They're here," he said, his voice low. I scooped Daniel up into my arms and went to the door, my heart pounding a steady, determined rhythm. My parents were standing on the porch. My mother's face was puffy from crying, but her eyes were hard. My father stood behind her, his arms crossed, his expression stormy. "We need to see our grandson," my mother said, her voice trembling with emotion. It wasn't a request. It was a demand. "Hello, Mom. Dad," I said calmly. "You didn't call." "We shouldn't have to call to see our own grandchild," my father grumbled. "After what happened, yes, you should," I replied. "We are not going to stand on the porch and argue," my mother said, trying to push past Liam to get into the house. Liam stood his ground, a solid, immovable wall. "You're not coming in," I said. The words were quiet, but they held the weight of a final decision. My mother stopped, stunned. "What do you mean we're not coming in? This is ridiculous. We are his grandparents." "And you have been offered a path to start building that relationship," I said. "A path that starts with honesty, not with demands and staged photo shoots." "We are done talking about the photos," my mother cried, her voice rising. "We have been humiliated enough. We came here to see the baby and to move on." "Move on?" I asked, incredulous. "You think you can just show up here and pretend nothing happened? You think you can just move on without ever once apologizing? Without ever admitting that what you did was wrong?" "We said we were sorry," my father shouted. "No," I corrected him. "You said you were sorry you got stuck in traffic. You said you felt terrible. You have never once said, 'Chloe, we are sorry we chose to watch a football game instead of being there for the birth of our grandson. It was a selfish and hurtful thing to do, and we were wrong.' Until I hear those words, and until I believe you actually mean them, this door stays closed." This is it, I thought. This is the moment of truth. They could choose their pride or they could choose their grandson. My mother stared at me, her face a mask of fury and disbelief. I could see the struggle in her eyes. The words were right there on the tip of her tongue. But her pride was a powerful, suffocating force. To apologize would be to admit defeat. It would be to acknowledge that I was right. "You're a cruel, heartless girl," she finally spat, her voice dripping with venom. "To hold your own son hostage like this, to deny him his grandparents over such a petty thing. I don't know who you've become, but you are not the daughter I raised." "You're right," I said softly. "I'm not. The daughter you raised would have accepted your lies and made excuses for you. But that girl is gone. I'm a mother now. And my only priority is him." I gestured with my head towards the sleeping baby in my arms. "His peace is more important than your pride." My father took a step forward, his face contorted with rage. "You will regret this." He repeated his earlier threat. "When you're all alone, you'll see. Family is all you have." "I am not alone," I said, looking back at Liam, who put a supportive hand on my shoulder. I have my family right here, the one that shows up. The finality of my words seemed to finally hit them. They had no more moves to make. They had tried manipulation, blackmail, and now a full frontal assault. They had failed at every turn. Their power over me was gone. My mother let out a choked sob of pure frustration and turned away. My father gave me one last look, a look of pure hatred, and then followed her down the porch steps. They got into their car without looking back and drove away. I stood in the doorway for a long time, watching the car disappear down the street. Liam's hand was a warm, steady pressure on my shoulder. I looked down at Daniel, his face so peaceful and innocent. I had done it. I had protected him. I had drawn the line. The silence they left behind was not empty. It was full of peace. It was the sound of a new beginning. In the months that followed, life settled into a new, quieter rhythm. We didn't hear from my parents. The flying monkeys, like my brother and my mother's friends, eventually fell silent when their attempts to guilt me failed. The story of the do-over photo shoot had leaked out thanks to Aunt Carol, who was appalled by their audacity. It had cemented their reputation as completely self-absorbed and manipulative, and it had validated my decision in the eyes of the wider family. They had wanted to control the narrative, and in the end, they had. They had become the villains of their own story. We built a new kind of family, one based on presence and honesty. Liam's parents visited often, their love for Daniel pure and uncomplicated. Aunt Carol became a surrogate grandmother, showering him with affection. Sarah was his official, cool aunt. Our life was full of love. It just wasn't the love I had once expected. I mourned the loss of my parents, or rather, the idea of the parents I wished I had. But I did not mourn the loss of the constant stress, the walking on eggshells, the feeling of always being a secondary character in their lives. The peace that settled in our home was worth more than any strained holiday dinner or faked family photo. One day, about a year later, I was cleaning out a closet and found a box of old photo albums. I sat on the floor and flipped through them. There I was, a little girl with my parents. At a birthday party, my dad was half watching a game on a small TV in the background. On a family vacation, my mom was reading a magazine while I built a sandcastle by myself. The evidence had been there all along. I just hadn't wanted to see it. The football game wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of a lifetime of choices. I closed the album and put it back in the box. I didn't need to look at it anymore. I knew the truth. A few weeks after that, a card arrived in the mail. It was a birthday card for Daniel's first birthday. It was from my parents. Inside, they had written, "Happy first birthday to our darling grandson. We hope to meet you one day." Tucked inside was a crisp $50 bill. I stared at the card. "We hope to meet you one day." As if they were strangers, distant relatives who lived on the other side of the world, and not the people who lived 45 minutes away and had chosen to watch television instead of witness his birth. The passive, blame-shifting language was all I needed to see to know that nothing had changed. They still saw themselves as the victims. I took the $50 bill and donated it to the local children's hospital in Daniel's name. I threw the card in the trash. They wanted a perfect picture to post on their social media, a snapshot of a happy family that didn't exist. They wanted the image of doting grandparents without doing any of the actual work. All I had ever wanted was for my parents to be present, to show me that I mattered as much as their hobbies. In the end, we were both disappointed. But my disappointment had led me to build a life of authentic joy and true connection for my son. Theirs had left them with nothing but a tarnished reputation and an empty photo album. They had missed the main event, and now they didn't get a season pass. They never would.